Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Huddle. If you're sitting here and you're like, where's JR? Where's the intro music? Where is all that stuff? Well, you've got the B host with the A co-host in
Oh,
Justin Adams coming on. So,
good time.
but I am Zack Guggenheim, host of the Big Ten Football Talk podcast, co-host of the Big Ten Huddle. Excited to be joined by my friend, brother in arms here, as fellow podcasters, Justin Adams, the H-Town Husker. How you doing tonight, Justin?
I'm doing great, man. Just got off another stream for the Nebraska channel, so I'm ready to rock and roll, man. I'm all warmed up. So
Very good.
excited to work with you
Very
again,
good.
though, man. We worked together before on your show. It was a blast. So looking forward to it. And I've been on this show before. Always a good time. So
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, we're not talking a lot of Nebraska today,
nope.
but we know you got thoughts about the whole league, and we're going to be talking about some of your former Nebraska, I guess still Nebraska rivals, but it's not as much West
Yeah.
stuff going on.
Just
So,
the Big Ten. The Big Ten now.
yeah, the Big 10, 18,
Yep.
25, however many. But
Never grows.
speaking of West, we're gonna get right into it. A little bit of maybe a softball as we start. Adam Rittenberg showed a conceptual image for its temporary Lakeside Northwestern's temporary Lakeside football stadium. And it looks beautiful, right? It's right by Lake Erie, I think it is. Looks beautiful. Of course, that is the temporary site for many of their football games while they build the new stadium. Um, One thing to note about that stadium: capacity is 15,000.
Yeah.
Just for context, my local college, Bucknell University, Patriot League Division One, they hold 13,100. Northwestern's a Big Ten school. Let's just ask this: does this stadium make up for how Northwestern has handled hosting football for the 2024 season?
I'm gonna be honest, like the stadium, yes, it looks beautiful and all that, but a lot of the stuff that we've been reading is pretty on point in terms of it's going to be freezing cold, and it's it's smaller than high school stadiums in the state of Texas, but that is also going to drive up ticket prices. So, I've heard a lot of clamoring about Northwestern fans talking about ticket prices and stuff like that. Um, I don't know. The general feeling around it is from what I've heard people aren't necessarily a big fan of it. I don't know if you've heard differently, but you're lined up in the end zones. The viewing isn't great. The sidelines there are very low. There's not a lot of seating on the sidelines. It's mainly stacked up in the 2-point conversion territory. And so I don't know, man. The whole thing, while it looks beautiful on the concept and stuff like that, I just don't think it is nice in terms of a viewing and fan experience in terms of being at the game, watching the game. So that's just my personal take on it. And from what I've gathered from looking around at other, fans from Northwestern, especially talking about the ticket prices and stuff like that. So, I'm a little bit on the downside of on the negative side of this.
Yeah, I think similarly. You make a really good point about the weather
Mhm.
because the concept art's like spring and summer. I've been in Chicago in October,
Yep.
and it was awful
Yeah.
weather-wise. And
November.
that's
Yeah.
and that's like that's like a mile from the lake.
Yeah.
Imagine being right next to it with
Nothing
the,
to block that wind.
no. And so that's going to be a pain. There's a reason why Ohio State is playing them at Wrigley Field and like other teams are going to bigger venues
Yeah.
because while I do think I've given Northwestern a lot of garbage
Yeah.
for this, but they are making, they're making efforts
Yeah.
to make something out of nothing.
Yes.
But like it's a very small something.
Yes.
And I think this is my concern, not just for this, but even like the new stadium, which is going to be state of the art. It's going to look great, but like your capacity, it for this is 15,000. I did research. I didn't get all the stadiums.
Mhm.
This at least of the stadiums I saw would be the lowest attendance of any MAC school.
Mhm. Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, and, like, their new stadium is gonna be, like it would be, like, at the top end of the MAC.
Yep.
And so, to me, it just signals, like, Northwestern, do you know that you're in the Big Ten?
Yeah. It's I don't know if Northwestern feels like they're in the Big Ten half the time. I mean, because the way Northwestern runs as it is, it's a hard school to recruit to just because of the standards that they set
Mhm.
there. And, for all intents and purposes, they don't have a huge fan base. So, I think it's one of those things that Northwestern thought, like, we'll just do something and we'll probably get away with it. And, you know, it's just I don't think there was a lot of forethought in terms of the planning of it. Cause at least at the very least, what you could have done is built the sides up more. So at least there's something blocking the winds coming in from and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
just improve the viewing experience. But in terms of just even the way that they built it, the end zones aren't the best views, and that
yeah,
seems to where I don't know if that the actual layout in terms of the seating numbers from the sidelines to the end zones, but it looks like the end zones are built up more. Now again, the sidelines are stretched out a little further, but it looks like the majority of the seating is on the end zones. And so just from a viewing experience and Northwestern fans not necessarily being, rocking heavy, showing up heavy with the team to begin with, I don't think that that's going to help matters, and the ticket prices, I don't think they're willing to pay an arm and a leg for these tickets. So,
right.
in the grand scheme of things, they may have hurt themselves in that regard. Like I said, like you talked about, just the size of it. I've seen high school football stadiums in Texas 6 times the size of this, so
Yeah. There on the flip side of this, Justin, I wonder is and especially with the new stadium coming,
Mhm,
is there maybe a sense where Northwestern kinda knows itself and says, "Okay, we know we're not Nebraska. We're
mhm.
not Ohio State. We're not these big fan bases like in the Big Ten. And so we're gonna target for a smaller market. We're gonna target for a smaller audience." Do you think there's any way that that smaller attendance, like, actually helps them?
That remains to be seen just because of the fact that if you do have a problem selling tickets and the ticket prices go up, you're still gonna have that problem. People
Mm,
are not
yeah,
necessarily gonna be willing to pay more, um, because they barely pay the prices as it is. The way Nebraska's doing their stadium renovation is they're blocking off sections at a time, and they're gonna work on this part of it for a certain amount of time, and then once that's renovated, they're gonna move to the next part of it. And so, I'm not sure how the meeting room went with the planning and stuff like that, but I just don't think that they really thought it through in terms of the entire picture. And I think this was kind of just what they were able to string together. I think it almost seems like they kind of figured it out as they went along, in my
yeah,
opinion.
yeah.
And this is what they ended up with. But the matter of the fact is this is just kind of what it is. And now they got to rock with it and lay their head where they buried their grave. So we'll see how it works out. It could be a home field advantage for them, just because of
Mm.
but it's just not going to be a fun experience for the fans. That's for sure.
You're gonna have to be diehard, you
Yeah.
pay $100 to sit in sub-zero temperatures with wind chill. Yee.
I live in Arizona. I'm from Texas. I was stationed overseas in Bahrain. All I know is hot weather. You will not catch me in that stadium.
You'll be chilling in your house watching that.
It could be a
I
Nebraska national championship game in that stadium, and I won't be there.
Yeah, that's saying something right there.
Yeah.
I'll say one last thought, and I'd love to get your thought.
Mhm,
Northwestern had a great season,
mhm.
right? Like 8-5, like David Braun, coach of the year, like runaway. And that was with Greg Schiano having an amazing season as
Yes.
well. And like you can argue Jim Harbaugh obviously winning the Natty, great season. David Braun was the coach of the year.
Yeah.
Terrible recruiting class,
Mhm.
and now you're gonna have to try to sell recruits on this. Like, is there a possibility? Maybe this is a leading question. This is a leading question, so let me scrap that. In terms of recruiting, like, what is the likelihood that this might actually downward trend to the point where it might actually get David Braun fired?
The thing about it is if David Braun is used as a scapegoat for this, I honestly think, what Northwestern has in David Braun for the recruits that he's gonna get, because Northwestern's a hard place to recruit to as is, I don't really
Yeah.
think, like I think people who want to play at Northwestern are going to want to come play for David Braun. And
That's a good
so
point.
I
That's a really good
think
point.
he's still going to sell the image that he has sold. He's still going to, this is temporary. We're going to move into the new stadium and stuff like that. So I do think he has the ability to recruit on himself because, David Braun right now is a hot name in college football, just coming off of last season. So I do think this is a good time for it, being that he does have the momentum and he can recruit people, based on him as a coach. And I think more along the lines of the players are going to go to Northwestern for the school, the academics, and the football players are going to go to play for the coach. And I don't think this will have too much of a factor into that, as Northwestern just really wasn't one of those places where you go to see the facilities as a big recruiting point as it is.
Yeah, and if Dave Braun's proven he can coach.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good point. Like, they've never had the facilities to begin with, and so it is a dip, but it's not like, say, an Ohio State or a Nebraska where if all the facilities are gone,
Yeah.
like, it actually could be a detriment.
I don't think it
Yeah.
changes the recruiter strategy too much.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it stinks for the Northwestern fans.
Yeah.
But it's not going to sink your strategy or program.
So. I don't think so. Northwestern is what they are. I don't think this changes that. And again, I still think David Braun is a good enough coach and a good enough, I guess when you hear him speak, David Braun, he sounds like a good dude. He's somebody who players will buy into. And I think he's going to sell them on what he's building more so than what Northwestern is building, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Good thoughts. Good thoughts. Let's move on. We're going to move from a team that, they don't have a ton of cachet nationally to the national champions, the Michigan Wolverines. News came out that there is a possibility that they might let Will Johnson, maybe the top-rated corner in college football, play a little receiver. Shades of Charles Woodson.
Yep.
Initial thoughts on that idea?
So, me personally, I think if you have a guy who's the top cornerback potentially in college football and your number one cornerback on your team, that in the talks of this, when people think about playing a two-way player, they think of like a Travis Hunter who's going to be playing a ton of snaps on either side of the ball. And I looked up a little bit on how this came to be, and Will Johnson mentioned that he brought it up to the staff, not vice versa. But then, the OC wants it, but the other players are excited for it. And of course, the fans are excited for it because, Will Johnson being an extremely athletic player, just a do-it-all guy. He played a lot of different places and positions in high school. He lined up all over the place in high school. However, a lot of guys do that. And you always run the risk of one play ending his season. If you roll him out there on the offensive side of the ball and he gets cracked, or pulls a hamstring or just something like that, then you lose that lockdown cornerback. And lockdown cornerbacks are hard to come by, and cornerback is one of the hardest positions to play on the field. So when you have a guy out there who's a lockdown cornerback who can be one of the top in college football, I don't necessarily know if you want to risk it. And I don't think I would. Just in college football, it's hard enough to stay healthy as it is, especially in the Big Ten. And, if they do, maybe wrap him in some packages here and there, maybe throw it in like just sneak him out on the field somewhere. Don't put him out there for 10, 12 snaps a game, because I don't necessarily think you have to. I think it's a fun concept. I think it's fun for people to talk about. I'm not sure how much of legs it's growing within Sharon Moore's head, if he's really contemplating that. But yeah, it would have to be very sparingly. And, with recovery, taking the hits, let's say you go out there on the offensive side of the ball, you run them out there, defense just comes off the field, you run them out there for a quick play, or a couple plays. And all of a sudden the defense is back out there. Will Johnson's back out there on defense having to cover the top receiver.
Yep.
it's for anybody who's played football. That's and this isn't even in the high school level where this is easy for these guys. I'm talking from somebody who's not nearly Will Johnson. I did not have the ability to go play in college. I can just imagine how difficult that would be college level. And Will Johnson, of course, he believes in himself. He's very talented. He obviously could go out there and do it, but I don't necessarily think it's worth the risk. And I think Sharon Moore knows that. And I think if Sharon Moore does it, it's going to be very, very sparingly used in that regard. So,
yeah, I tend to agree with that thought. And I think forget injuries for a minute. Like, I think injuries, obviously, you're pointing it out, but it would be different if they had the secondary they had a year ago.
Correct.
Right? Because, they had other guys, like Sanders still, not like elite guy, but he was really good.
Yes.
You had Keon Sabb back there. You had, your other safeties. Makari Page was back there. I'm blanking on the other corner that was there. Rod Moore was healthy.
Yep.
You don't have a lot of those guys.
No.
And that would concern me is that you don't have anybody close to Will Johnson. You have good corners, but they're not as experienced. And so now you're not just losing a lockdown corner, you're losing your most experienced corner, you're losing the leader in the secondary. Like that really does matter. Yep. And I think if you're exhausting him, then you're losing the opportunity to play a lot of good receivers, and you're going to face a lot of good receivers this year.
Right.
Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, like all those teams, I think they play USC, right? And all those teams have NFL level receivers that you are going to have to lock down. And so you've got, like, I don't think you can have him maybe 10 plays, have him as a gadget guy. Like Jabril Peppers comes to mind as a guy where that worked a bit.
Yeah.
Let me go here because Michigan they lost their entire offense, right? Aside from Colston Loveland, what do you think this says about Michigan's confidence in their other skill position players?
I don't necessarily think. Now, I will say, of course, Michigan's skill positions, especially at the receiver position, it's way less talented of a group in a room than it was prior. But I don't think it's too much of an indictment on them, but the way it came to be. Because if this is not something where Sharon Moore looked at the wide receiver room and was like, okay, well, I don't think we have enough talent here. Let's flirt with the idea of putting Will Johnson here. I think just the way it came to be with what I heard Will Johnson mentioning in it and then them kind of running with it, I think it's more so of an excitement thing and something that a wrinkle that they may, throw in there. However, even if you do, run him out there for 10 snaps a game, right? Those snaps add up over the course of the season. And that's that 10 snaps a game. How many times is he going to get the ball and take a hit, in that? Because those hits add up, those hits pile up. And then he has to be fresh to be able to go out there and hang with some of these elite playmakers that he's going to be defending and covering. So, if he comes out there and it's successful for a play or two, but then it hurts him on the defensive side of the ball, does it really help? And so I think they're better off finding the strength and development of the guys that they have in that wide receiver room. Because, who does he come in for? Does he come in and run some running back? Does he come in and run some wide receiver? What is he exactly going to do? But I just, for me, looking at, and I did a video of Tommy Hill, and not to bring everything back to Nebraska, but Tommy Hill is a very prime example of this, because Tommy Hill is somebody that Nebraska brought in who juggled back and forth from wide receiver to cornerback, right? And when he was juggling back and forth from wide receiver to cornerback, he was a liability. But last season, they put him at cornerback, and as the season went along, he stuck more and more as a cornerback. And his PFF rating year over year went from 60 to 89. And instead of being a liability and somebody who wasn't even supposed to start coming into the 2023 season, he was up there in terms of coverage grades right there stacked up with Kamari Lassiter, who was drafted 40th overall and or 41st overall, and Kool-Aid McKinstry, who was drafted 42nd overall. So when you look at that, it also helps to have a guy just focusing in on what he does well so he can develop fully at that position and not have his attention kind of deviated in a bunch of different directions. And especially when you have to focus in, like I said, on some of these guys who are going to be top tier athletes, you really need to have your mind locked in, focused, and ready on the task at hand and covering that guy, because that's not an easy task. Yeah, Will Johnson's talented, but even that alone is not an easy task.
Yeah, and I think we romanticize the two-way player, right?
Yeah.
You go back, obviously Michigan had it in Charles Woodson, one of the greatest players, in the past 25, 30 years. But defenses have gotten more complicated. Offenses have gotten more complicated.
Yeah.
The players are more athletic, and stronger, faster. I mean, the game has evolved. And I think what you're pointing out is that it's very hard to be elite at one position and also focus. And we've seen that, like when players have changed positions, that has been very hard.
Yes.
So I think everything you're saying makes sense. And I tend to agree. Like Samaj Morgan, like he's raw, but that dude, like if people, I've heard people chirping about Michigan saying, oh, they don't have a lot of talent at the wide receiver position. Go back and watch Samaj Morgan.
Yeah.
I know he fumbled the one punt return in the Rose Bowl. That dude can fly, and he gets in the open field, he's gone.
Yeah.
And so they've got athletic dudes at wide receiver. You don't know them.
Yeah. Just and the only way for people to know them is to put your focus on them, develop them, let them go out there and learn to make plays, and then let Will Johnson do what he does.
Yep. Before we move on to the next topic, let me get to a couple comments. One in particular, I just really want to highlight because I just very much appreciate it. DK saying, "Hey Guggenheim, looking handsome as always." I appreciate that. I very much am always appreciative of comments of
Get that skincare routine going.
Yeah, just a washcloth with water. That's it. And then Sonny Verma, he said, "I came here to see what list JR came up with to rank Ohio State number one." We don't have any lists today, so I'm sorry to disappoint you, Sonny. I am an Ohio State homer at heart, though. So
Sonny's sad when Illinois isn't talking about.
Which unfortunately we're also not talking about Illinois tonight. I'm sorry, Sonny. But and LFG has been blowing up the chats.
LFG.
But we'll get to a couple of your comments. Actually, one that's relevant to this. Agree with Justin. Not big on the gimmicky two-way shtick. I appreciate not stick but shtick.
Yeah.
For Will Johnson. That's well done.
Yep.
That's well done. And of course, JR. My bad, Sonny.
Building.
My bad. JR is watching to make sure. He's like, okay, have they burned it down yet?
Because I told him, I said, we'll try not to burn it down. Last time I came on here, I ruffled some feathers. So
that's okay. That's what we do on this show. We ruffle feathers. We ruffle feathers. So hopefully we don't ruffle too many feathers, but this one is a bit more tricky. We are talking about Penn State and James Franklin. The doctor who was suing was awarded $5.25 million. Again, this is a ex-Penn State doctor who was wrongfully terminated by the Penn State Medical Center. It's in Hershey. And so it's not directly because of Penn State football, but there is some implication that part of it was James Franklin was maybe tampering, maybe manipulating things behind the scenes. Maybe my first question, as we kind of honestly talk about maybe a more sensitive topic, how does this headline impact Penn State?
Well, honestly, Penn State, the last thing they need is more anything to do with team doctors or anything like that in terms of negative light. But, I do think that there's a lot of nuance to this. And this is what I've learned when I was looking into this, is there's so much nuance to this and there's so many little details in here. Now, I do think this hurts Penn State more than it hurts James Franklin, which we'll get into in a little bit. But none of this looks good on Penn State for sure. However, there is a side to this where the way they talked about where they released him as a disgruntled former employee and stuff like that. I'm not sure the exact, what went down exactly in the case in terms of that, but I don't think the backlash on Penn State's going to be too terribly much. This is one of those things where I feel like the recourse is going to be, served. And I have read somewhere that the guy wasn't officially terminated, or I'm not even sure on the specific details of that, because there was a Penn State person that I talked to was saying that he officially wasn't terminated, was still on the team's, uh, I guess, what do you call it, the little doctrine of the employees,
Yeah.
or
Oh,
he
yeah,
might
yeah.
move to a different role or whatever, and then eventually released, or they agreed to terms or something like that. So there's a lot more nuance to this, but I don't think Penn State is. I think it's going to be a bad look for Penn State, of course. But in terms of just what comes from this, I think it's going to be one of those things where they pay and move on. And yeah, I don't really see too much coming in the back burner of this, at least from what I've been able to find.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Dr. Scott Lynch is the doctor's name.
Yeah.
He's an orthopedic surgeon. Um, it's interesting because the I think it hurts Penn State almost as a university
Yes.
more
As-
than a football team,
Yeah.
which I think is weird because I think several people on social media have been like, "Oh, this is an indictment on the football program,"
Mhm.
which I was at Penn State, like, I was in ministry at Penn State during the Sandusky scandal, and
Yes.
so we know how quick things can go from, a headline to regardless of what you think about Sandusky and the Sandusky trial and all
Mhm.
that stuff, we know how quickly a headline can turn into a firestorm for a football program in a community.
Yeah.
I don't think this is I agree with you. I don't think it's the firestorm for the football program.
There's a
I
lot
don't even
worse happening out there than this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wouldn't even say it's a firestorm for Penn State, but it stings for sure.
Yeah, because it's Penn State, the Penn State reputation, it's just another thing to add to that. But there's a lot worse stuff going on out there, that even has been reported to teams and coaches that, like, in the grand scheme of things, this really, really isn't something that I look at Penn State and I'm like, oh, this is a terrible look for them. That's just me.
Yeah. There were some kind of whispers, and I think it was, Lynch himself who said there should be an NCAA investigation into medical malpractice.
Mhm.
Do you think anything comes from that? Like, I mean, we know how great the NCAA is to begin
Yeah.
with. Um, but do you think that there's gonna be any investigation, like, further into either Penn State or even other programs for medical malpractice?
It's tough to tell. One thing we know about the NCAA, if they do an investigation, it's gonna take a long time. I don't have anything on it, or to get anywhere on it, or anything like that. So, um, the NCAA is locked up in so much litigation right now that I think they're choosing their battles. I don't know if this is one that they're going to go in and try to fight, because again, they're still dealing with lawsuits from the ACC, et cetera, over in North Carolina and Florida State and over in Florida and stuff like that. So
As they should.
yeah,
Sorry, anyway, keep going.
yeah, as they should. So if again, I don't know how big this is on the radar. I don't necessarily think we'll hear a lot about this, at least in the near future. Maybe something comes from it down the road, but in terms of the NCAA and how they look at it, I think they have bigger fish to fry right now because they're fighting for their life out there in court. So
Yep, yep,
remains to be
and,
seen.
yeah, and the motto of at least my motto, and I think it's becoming the motto of this show, the NCAA stinks. So,
That's
that's
they've been stinking when they weren't paying players.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny, you said they're choosing their battles, and I'm like, and they choose the wrong one every time.
100%. Yes, they do.
Like,
Yes, they do.
my goodness.
The last thing I want to
Um
do is another court system.
you alluded to Franklin. I think there are a few people, dare I say, maybe are hoping that this impacts Franklin. I don't think it does, unless if like something much bigger comes out. But
Yeah.
you mentioned that you don't think much either. Kind of expound on that a little bit.
So from what I gathered, okay, for James Franklin was removed from this lawsuit because the actual attorney for the doctor had a filing issue or missed a deadline, or it was improper filing. So Franklin was supposedly moved due to a statute of limitations of sort, technicality. Um, and so Franklin was originally mentioned supposedly to support a retaliation claim and as the reason for the firing. But the gripe is with the Dr. Lynch's direct supervisor, most likely, as opposed to James Franklin. So James Franklin, due to this doctor's lawyers, whatever he did wrong, filing malpractice, whatever he did wrong, that almost kind of exonerates James Franklin in a way. And from what I gathered, it was the entire thing was a messy situation, and this is why
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of nuance to this that it leaves a lot of it to be determined because there was other stuff that justifies Penn State's decision in this. They were talking about how Penn State, reason they didn't want a doctor who was living over 100 miles away and that he wasn't near the campus when they needed him in important situations, refused to move closer to campus. And there was even talks about arguing with Franklin about covering up the Nike logo, with bandage wraps,
Mhm.
which isn't, James Franklin's fault, but, due to money, business, sponsors, Franklin does have to make it a point to abide by that.
Yeah.
And like I said, some articles stated that he was fired, but others say he was just removed from the position as a team doctor and was still employed there. So it sounds like, you know, one person it's a battle of egos right now. It's like one
Yeah.
ego was rude to the other, that rude person was rude back, and now it just turned into a for lack of a better words, a pissing match between them, and now he's getting $5+ million. And so
Yeah.
that's why I don't think necessarily too much is going to come from this, whether it be on the Penn State front, on the James Franklin front, just because there's so much nuances to these cases as is such in these cases. We only get part of the story in these articles. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of stuff in there that will keep this battle from being fought further.
Yeah. I appreciate we had Andrew from the Nittany Blues podcast on last week, and he was talking and I appreciated his perspective on it. And I think it's very much what you're talking about, Justin, that a lot of people want to make this a James Franklin and Penn State football issue.
Yeah.
And the reality is it's not. It involves certain things that James Franklin did
Mhm.
that may not have been the best decisions,
Correct.
but they weren't like nefarious necessarily or
Illegal. Right.
illegal. It was more like a doctor didn't agree with this decision or that decision, and the other doctors disagreed, and there's some scuffling. And I mean, there's more to it. I'm summarizing.
Yeah.
So, like, if anyone in the comments is like, "Oh, that's not what," like, I know but I think what I'm trying to point out is like the nuance that you're talking about, Justin, is that it's not clear cut in terms of this being a football issue.
Yes.
It is a disagreement, and then that disagreement led to either a removal or a firing, and we don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
And so I think it's messy,
Mhm.
but I think Franklin, like something big would have to really come out about Franklin
Yeah.
for this to really touch him.
Yeah.
And I think people are tempted by the 5.25 million to be like, "Oh, that signals." It's like, no, that's just to satisfy both parties.
Yeah. It's to get it out of their hair and be done with it. And with this, it's another one of those things where it's like, James Franklin, people are going to want to put this in indictment on him, but there's really nothing that's going to come from this. So it doesn't matter how much they want that to happen. It's just not going to happen. And when it comes to like I said before, it comes how many instances have we probably seen where a team doctor disagrees with a university, a team coach, or something like that? This probably happens all of the time. This just got a little bit more messy, ended up in court, and they had to settle it. That's
Yeah.
point case, end of story. There's not really, it's not, it's not the worst thing in the world that's happened.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Good thoughts. Good thoughts. Yeah. And I think I the reality too is there's been so much good publicity about how Franklin has treated players.
Yeah.
Again, Saquon has come out, Trace McSorley has come out. If you want figureheads for someone's tenure to like come out and defend,
That's what you
like
want.
those are good guys.
A successful.
And yeah. And they're coming out and say, hey, he didn't push us back. He didn't. So I think there's too much there's not enough evidence, and there's too much supporting evidence that
Yeah.
like I think Franklin's untouchable from at this point.
Yeah, and again, his name was removed from the suit due to improper filing from the doctor's attorney. So if he wanted any, anything to come from this from James Franklin, well, he better go sue his lawyer then, because his lawyer dropped the ball in that regard in terms of the statute of limitations. So he needs to fight his battle with his attorney.
Yep. Good word. Couple comments here. One, Brian Myers, go Bucks. OHIO. I'm gonna get to this one because I think both of us will like this, Justin.
Mm-hmm.
Early 2024 Big Ten non-conference games. I like Nebraska over Colorado and Texas over Michigan. I think we're both excited if those things happen.
Yeah, Nebraska over Colorado, absolutely. I'll be at that game. My family's taking a party bus out there. We're going to be having a blast out there. So definitely looking forward to hopefully winning that one. But Texas over Michigan, Texas is one of those things. I liked Texas last year coming into the season. I haven't predicted at 10-2. Of course, they did very well. And I think Texas isn't going to miss a beat this year. And this is no knock on Michigan. I do think Michigan's going to take a bit of a step back. Of course, as we talked about before, they don't have the talent playmakers they had before. They lost a lot of their staff. So I do think Texas will win that game. It's not going to be easy, of course, going into Ann Arbor. But yeah, Nebraska over Colorado. I'm taking all that. Give me all of that. Everybody drop your comments saying Nebraska beating Colorado, because everybody out here. I hate Colorado, dude. Deion, like Uncle Lou says, Deion's a teen mom with a golden whistle.
Nice. That's gonna be a fun. It's gonna be a fun trench battle with Texas, Michigan. That offensive line for Texas versus Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham. That'll be must see TV right there.
Stylistically, that is going to be one of the better non-con games. I have to look through the full non-con schedule. I think you got USC, LSU.
Yep.
Texas, Michigan, like that's got to be on the top of the list of non-con games to watch this year.
Yep. Well, and that's a great segue. LFG also said Captain Obvious, expanded CFP causes teams to schedule one or two more cupcakes in order to find a path of least resistance to a CFP berth. Mm-hmm. You mentioned USC, LSU, mm-hmm. and news came out earlier this week that Lincoln Riley.
Oh, that's right. We're talking about that game. Of course it's scheduled. I think they're playing.
They're playing, but Lincoln Riley apparently did not want to play that. And in fact, he's tried to possibly get out of that game for the past 2 years. It didn't work. They're still playing it, apparently. Do you have a problem with USC trying to cancel that game?
Not at all. I don't. And I think people who do probably have a gripe with USC or Lincoln Riley of some kind, because think about it this way. That's the transitional year where they're coming into the Big Ten, right? And they already have to play Notre Dame in the non-con. Mm-hmm. So you're facing think about, a couple of years ago, you're facing, sorry, dog here on my mic. I got dogs all over the place. So 2 years ago, you're looking at, the USC, Lincoln Riley being there coming into the Big Ten, and you're looking at this LSU versus USC week 1. And I think it might be a little overblown. Like, I do probably think that there was a discussion there, like, hey, can we potentially get out of this game this year? Maybe move it down the road or something like that. But I don't think it's one of those things where Lincoln Riley was like, I'm scared to play this game. Let's get LSU off our schedule at all costs. I think it might be a little bit overblown. We live in a world of polarization and clicks, and especially when you got a coach like Lincoln Riley and a blue blood like USC, the schedule's already crazy. So they want also a fighting chance to get in the playoff just like everybody else. But if their schedule is that much more difficult, you got Nebraska opening with UTEP. Okay, I would much rather open up with UTEP than LSU.
Yep.
So I don't think this is any conversation that any other coach might like that they probably would have behind closed doors. Somehow this got out, but their focus, the USC Notre Dame game, they want that to be their big non-conference game each year. But let's be real. I don't necessarily think that this is because he's scared of anybody. Think of the teams that Lincoln Riley's played against. So I do think it's a little bit blown out of proportion. I do think there's some merit to the fact that he might have wanted this game off the schedule, which I don't blame him. If you're a fan of UFC or USC, or you're a fan of any other school and you see LSU week 1 and you see other teams playing UTEPs and you see other teams playing, ITT Technical Institute out there, you're going to want to be able to, start your season off with an easy, because you got growing pains week 1. Okay. Especially USC coming out there with this new defensive system they're going to have to implement. They want to be able to come out and get get this defense kind of flowing and into place. And that's not an easy team to do it against in your first year of the Big Ten when you're in kind of an arms race of trying to figure out where you stand in this, because a lot of people are going to put stock into year 1 about where these teams fall. They're going to put a lot of emphasis on this. They're not going to give them a lot of credit and be like, well, they'll year 2, year 3. No, they're going to look at this season, how the Big Ten flowed out. And you're going to have Big Ten teams talking trash, be like, well, UFC came in and they finished 10th, Nobody's going to look at the non-conference schedule at the end of the season and be like, well, okay, well, we'll give them credit because they played LSU. No, USC fans are going to make that argument, but not other people. So I get it. 100% get it.
Yeah. LFG earlier, he said that 24 USD will be improved. Open field tackling. Danton Lynn, I think, is going to really help them. Yeah. But he made a point that even since 2014, they've struggled with mobile running quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're going to struggle like they have, but I think to your point, Justin, I think the D will be much improved, but to settle into a system is very hard. And then you got to do it against a pretty, at least from a roster perspective, a pretty good roster. Week 1 just feels like it's a rough time. There's another layer to this that you talked about, people kind of killing Lincoln Riley and kind of blowing it out of proportion. There is something about college football media and fans that when they smell blood in the water, forget just a little polarization, they go to the nth degree. Lincoln, 8-5 last year with the Heisman winner, couldn't beat Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. And so there's a lot, there's a lot of kind of negative press right now with Lincoln, which I don't think is completely undeserved. But I do think I 100% agree with you that this is very overblown.
Yeah.
And I think the thing you have to look at, you're talking about entering the Big Ten, the schedule is insane.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this on this show. I think we might have talked about it when you were on my show several months ago, because my upset pick for the year in the Big Ten is Nebraska over USC. Mm-hmm. And part of my point in that, USC's lost a lot of depth with a lot of transfers.
Yeah. And
then you've got LSU week 1, at Michigan week 3, Wisconsin week 4, which you don't know what you're going to get with Wisconsin, but that's
always a tough team though.
Yeah. And Tyler Van Dyke, if he hits, he can throw the ball.
And I love their coach. So
yeah,
I love Fickle.
Yep. You go to Minnesota, which is, senior Layden this year, and you're going there. Max Brosmer, a lot of people are high on him. You host Penn State.
That's rough.
That's their first 6 out of the first 7 games. I'm ugly. Yeah. And then you finish Rutgers. I'd be more high on Rutgers if it was at Rutgers, but I think Rutgers is not going to be an easy out
Rutgers,
this
I have
year.
Rutgers as our first loss.
Yeah, like
Very
Rutgers is going to be good.
Yeah, they're physical. They play that New Jersey style of football, which is physicality. That team is a lot better than people give them credit for. They got Ethan Kaliakmanis, who's not the greatest quarterback in the world, of course, but he's 2-0 against Nebraska. So, that team is that is a good team.
Yeah,
People think of Rutgers as the Rutgers from old, but they're not really paying attention. That's a good team. And
yeah,
that's a team that's going to put it on you with physicality. They're going to hit you. They're going to make you feel it.
yep, yeah. And then talking about the depth issue, they finished with Nebraska, UCLA, which is their rival. Anything happens in rivalry games, and then Notre Dame.
Yep, that's rough, dude.
I, I maybe Purdue has a harder schedule in the Big Ten, but I
Yeah.
can't think. And you're going to complain because they want to drop you LSU?
Yeah, because like they don't I mean, they don't need LSU on that schedule with the expanded playoff, especially even if the schedule wasn't that hard. It's not like one of those things where it's like we need a tough non-con to be able to make the top 4. Well, you ain't gonna make the top 4 anymore. So I do not blame them in the slightest for wanting to get LSU off that schedule looking forward at it, because that's a gauntlet. That's brutal. For year one, transitioning to a new defense, that's tough. And then losing your quarterback. Now we know Lincoln Riley, he's ready to rock and roll. Quarterback, he's gonna I don't doubt any quarterback that's under Lincoln Riley. But
Yeah.
still, that's a tough. You want some bye weeks in there somewhere, and they don't really have them.
Yep. Yeah. And even the one that Maryland, I don't think is going to be as good, but they have to go to Maryland.
Mhm.
Right? They have to go to Washington. Like, I don't think Washington's going to be great, but
No,
like you got to go to Washington.
Washington's a tough place to play.
Yeah. So it's a brutal. I don't blame him. And I think there are some years, like I wish Ohio State had a premier non-conference game this year.
Mhm.
They don't. They still play, or they play at Oregon, they play at Penn State, they play Michigan at home. So that's 3 spotlight games. I wish they had a 4th.
Yeah.
But like if they had the schedule that USC had, I'm like,
No.
no, no thanks.
If
And
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, if we had that schedule, I'd be packing into 2025.
But like, yeah. There's last week, and I'm gonna repeat it because I want it on record just in case if it happens. But we were joking last week that the Big Ten championship game might come down to the schedule, and we're like, we might have Rutgers, Iowa as our Big Ten championship game.
Oh, that'd be brutal. I wouldn't mind Rutgers in there, but Iowa, man, you looking forward to a lot of punts in that game.
Yep, it's true. That was I think a JR, Andrew, and I special was Rutgers, Iowa. And if you look at it,
lose your TV deals.
But New Jersey and Iowa fans, or people in New Jersey and Iowa would love it. So
yeah.
I'm going to get a couple comments in here. Brian, we had detoured to Texas, Michigan. Brian Myers, he asked, how much offense will Michigan be able to generate? Texas offense versus U of M's defense might be a good battle, but don't think the offense will do much against the Texas defense. And JR, who is commenting from home, if Texas defense is weak in the secondary, that's not good for Michigan. Alex Orji might become a competent passer, but it's going to be very difficult for him to arrive that early in the season. Yeah, I think that's a really go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think those are really good thoughts. Chime in.
Yeah, no, I mean, what you're looking at is you're looking at a team in a transition versus a team that has, they're there. They're where they wanted to be. They're past their transitional phase. That's where Texas is. Michigan's in a transitional phase. It's as simple as that. It's no knock on Michigan. It's just the fact that they've had so much turnover. It's very, very hard to have that much turnover and still field a team that can come in and beat a team like a Texas, and coming off a national championship, I think they can at least take that on the chin and understand that. But it's a transitional year. Texas is already where they want to be in terms of as a complete team. Michigan's going to work their way back there. I think Michigan's going to play them tough. Of course, that's a tough place to play, It's always a tough team to play. I do think Sharon Moore was the best decision that they could have made at the coaching spot. I think he'll have them ready. I don't necessarily think it'll be a blowout, maybe 2 scores, but I just think Texas is more of a well-oiled machine going in there.
Yeah. I think one thing we've been talking about, we talked to a couple guys from the Maize and Blue, I think it's Maize and Brew podcast. But I came away from that episode shocked at how much high-end talent Michigan still has.
Yeah.
And like the depth is going to be a bit of an issue. They still have some. Like it's not they lost a ton, but they had a ton.
Yeah.
But I think what scares me about Michigan is they still have a number of first round guys and All-Americans on that team, but the quarterback position and the offensive lack of continuity, like that transition, you're absolutely right. I think the transition is the killer.
Yes. Yeah, because you can't skip that part of it. I don't care how good your team is. When you're in a transition, you're always going to have growing pains. It's never been a situation where it just goes smoothly. Everything goes perfect year one. It may have happened in an outlier season, but more often than not, it's a transition. And that's just, they're going to have the growing pains of that. And a team like Texas, again, is one of those teams that you're going to have to realize is a great measuring stick to see where you're at. It's going to be really good for your team to go in there and play a tough opponent and probably play them close. They're going to learn a lot from that game. And dude, Michigan may go in there. Michigan may upset them. You never know, because Michigan's still a very good team. Like you said, they recruit with the top of the top. It's not like they lost everybody and they're just filling them in with some stop fill gap 3 stars or some walk-ons and stuff like that. That is a team that is built, through recruiting. They have a foundation there, but it's just they got to get the pieces back, to where they were, develop these guys, and then they'll be ready for those teams like Texas. It may take 1 year, may take 2 years, but it's going to take a little time.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. JR, talking about the Maize and Brew podcast, awesome Michigan guys. They were awesome. It was so fun talking with them about Michigan football. Brian Myers, he said, I think with how stacked the conferences are becoming, those big non-con games might go away. If you're playing 5 or 6 ranked teams and your conference schedule is asking a lot to add another. I agree, unless if they go to a more a model where you have like the top 50 teams in one big subdivision and then everybody else. But I think if they don't go to that, I think you're right. I think you're going to see more of the conferences being the hub for the big time matchups. And then the playoffs will be.
We may go to an all conference schedule at a certain point. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think changing.
Yeah. Yeah. And let the playoff do the non-conference talking, which I would hate it, but there'd be some things that would make sense about that.
It would make it a lot more questionable as to how other people match up with other schools without playing any of them during the regular season. So
yeah, that'd be a great grand experiment right there.
Correct.
So let's speak to another thing that is changing because of the ever-changing college football landscape. Minnesota at Wisconsin not being played on Saturday, but it was found out that they will play on a noon kick on CBS on Black Friday. And of course, the Iowa-Nebraska rivalry game going to a 7:30 on NBC. I think a lot of the buzz around this was really about Minnesota and Wisconsin. Iowa and Nebraska has been playing on Black Friday for years now, although I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that game in a minute. But fans are not happy about, at least Minnesota, Wisconsin fans are not happy about the shift to Black Friday. If you're one of these fans, a Badger fan or a Golden Gopher fan, how are you feeling about this?
So funny enough, I was curious about this. So I reached out to somebody that we've worked with on the Big Ten show, Alibaba. At Alibaba on Twitter, and you can find them over We Live for Big Saturday, or We Live for Big Sat. It's a Big Ten show as well. So he was able to give me insight from a Minnesota perspective. And, he said that he thinks that the added exposure, fans are excited about that. And but as somebody who likes to go to the games, like he doesn't really, it's harder for fans to really go on a Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and the time slot too, it being a morning kick on Black Friday, it's going to lead to less fans, Wisconsin fans being able to come in, which may impact, the overall feel of it in terms of the stadium and the actual, because we'll talk about in a second when Nebraska, Iowa, that 11 a.m. kick or whatever time it is. I'm in a different time zone, whatever time it is where y'all are.
Yeah.
It's tough because it's hard to get up for those games. But in terms of, this is kind of where we sit in terms of this network TV thing where it's about visibility. And so, to get your teams that visibility, they got a 2:00 NFL kick, the Chiefs game over on Amazon Prime. But so the Minnesota Wisconsin game is going to be on before that and should be over before that game. So they have their own little time slot right there. They don't have to compete with the Chiefs game. And so I think it's good for the overall viewership in terms of people being able to watch the game, being able to tune into Minnesota and see the Wisconsin and be able to see this rivalry, because I don't think a lot of people necessarily, when it's in terms of mixed in with the other games, how many people are watching it. So it is good on a visibility front. But like he said, for people who want to attend the games, especially away fans, makes it a lot more difficult. And those early kickoffs on Black Friday are tough.
Yeah. Well, it's helpful to remember that they're on Central Standard.
Yeah.
Because it's to me on the East Coast, it's 12 p.m. For Minnesota, and for Wisconsin, that's 11 a.m. And yeah, if you're a Wisconsin fan trying to travel to, I don't know how long the drive is, but you either got to get there late Thursday night which is a holiday,
Yep.
or you have to wake up at the crack of dawn to get there. And that I think that's a really helpful reminder to those of us on the East Coast. Like that really does factor in, and it factored into Nebraska and Iowa for the past, I don't know, what, 10 years, 12 years.
Yeah.
I really agree though with your point about viewership. And I think that's the new college football world. There are trade-offs.
Yeah.
One is, I think, the in-game, in-person experience at times gets shafted. Particularly, I think of college students, right? The actual students that go to the games. Like, think about it. It used to be that most college games were over before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I think it was 15 years ago they went more to the 12 game schedule. And
exactly, but sounds
yeah,
right.
like I remember Ohio State, Michigan always being the week before Michigan or before Thanksgiving, and now it's always the Saturday after. And so, like, there have been incremental changes that have messed with the fan experience on campus, and particularly college students. So that the reality is, as we continue to move towards this more corporate, more TV network type of alignment with college football, there's going to be really good things about it, but there's going to be some trade-offs, and I think this is one of the trade-offs. I am thankful that it's CBS and not Peacock.
Yeah.
Because could you imagine the outrage? And I would, as a non-Wisconsin, non-Minnesota fan, I'd be ticked.
Yes.
Because like this rivalry game, I think I saw it's like the one that's been played the most out of any rivalry game in college football. This deserves to have its own showcase.
Agreed.
And now it has it. And they have the coolest trophy too. Like you get an axe if you win the game.
Axe, baby.
Like, so that's really exciting. The thing that, like, it stinks that it's 11 a.m. Central, but I'm thankful it's CBS and not ESPN. Like, I think CBS, I'm not always a fan of their broadcasters, but their coverage, like their photography, their shots, their angles, I think it's the best in the game.
Score bug and everything. The song, can't beat it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I don't even care what, I hope it's Brad Nessler. I doubt it's Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson, but like it doesn't matter who the crew is. Like the production quality is going to be through the roof because of
Yeah.
CBS. Um, so that is exciting to me.
And as a Big Ten fan, like the national audience gets a chance to see it because as a Big Ten fan, I love this game. You know,
Yeah.
hard not to love this game, and so hopefully this will bring a lot of national eyes to this rivalry. And I don't know if they're going to continue it right here, but at the very least, at least some people get to see it and see just how big of a rivalry game this is. Because I don't know in the national landscape if people really understand it.
Yeah. And I think as not discouraged, but as maybe nervous as we are that the traditions are going away, this feels like a move in saying we still love the pageantry and tradition of college football.
Yeah,
Um, Alibaba
there he is.
mentioned was going to comment with my opinion, but Justin said it for me. Let me just say I'm pumped for a more national audience to experience the Axe game, the most played major college football rivalry.
Yep.
Yeah, I think there are certainly drawbacks, but I think that's the big LFG. Paul mentioned Paul Bunyan's axe and the little brown jug. Minnesota knows how to do their rivalry
I don't know
trophies.
the $5 bits of broken chair rivalry. No, that's an actual rivalry.
Yep. Yep. Oh, it's so good.
You have to get. I'll give you the backstory on that one later.
Is that Nebraska and which rivalry is that? The
I believe it's Minnesota.
is it it's not is that the Minnesota Penn State one that or is it Minnesota
No,
Nebraska?
it's Minnesota, Nebraska.
Oh, it
The
is
$5
Minnesota
bits of
Nebraska.
broken chair is Minnesota, Nebraska. Yeah,
Okay.
it
There
was. It's a meme basically that turned into a trophy. Essentially, yeah. There's a whole thing about it. I can actually share you. There's a whole backstory on it, but it's so funny. The $5 bits of broken chair, bro. It's so funny. But yeah, the chair needs to come back. The first truly internet based Robert, bro. That trophy is a disaster, but it's so funny. I like to me, I like that rivalry name more than what the Nebraska Iowa Heroes game. Like, let's
yeah.
give me the $5 bits of broken chairs back.
I'll take the 5 bits of broken chair over the Mayo Bowl. Like, that's just or the Jimmy Kimmel Bowl. That just needs
Yeah.
to die. Real quick before we kinda end here, your thoughts on Iowa, Nebraska moving to NBC in the primetime slot on Black Friday?
Yeah, the opposite of what it means for Minnesota, Wisconsin. This gives people, more of a chance to get to this game because you can, for all intents and purposes, go do your Thanksgiving stuff and then be able to travel to this game. Before with that 11 a.m. kick, this is what I was alluding to earlier. It's a little bit of a sleepy, yeah. Even for Nebraska, Iowa, it's a little bit of a sleepy kickoff. It's
Mhm.
hard to get up and get going. Everybody ate their turkey, coming off of the Thanksgiving. And so this gives an opportunity to be able to kind of put it in a primetime light. We're not competing with anybody for this time slot. And, it will make the atmosphere a lot more energetic and a lot more electric. I don't know how much more energetic it can be if it's a 10-13 game like it was last year. So hopefully it's not a punt off or else we might lose our primetime slot. But it does give an opportunity for more people to make it out there. It gives an opportunity for the atmosphere to be a bit better. And so I'm excited for it. Nebraska Iowa is a good rivalry. Like I said, I wish they had a better name for it, but it's something that I think hopefully will put on a good viewer experience. But it's a little scary just because of like knowing Iowa and Nebraska offenses of the past year. It is an opportunity for people to throw tomatoes at us. So we also run that risk.
Yeah.
But
Well, but Dylan Raiola, that's gonna be intriguing enough. Um,
we got 4 primetime games already.
yeah, and
So,
and there's a reason why. Yeah,
yeah.
because people are in on Matt Rule and Dylan Raiola.
Yeah.
So I I think there's a real possibility that that day for the Big Ten, there might be a dark horse, either Big Ten championship candidate in one of those games, or maybe even a playoff candidate.
Yep.
Which I think people might be shocked to hear that, but like I think both you and I could say that Nebraska will probably surprise people. I don't know if playoff is what we're thinking, but like
I
I
put
think
us
they're going to
I put
surprise
us at
people.
8-4. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
which I
maybe
think is
7-5 depending on the USC game. I have us winning the USC game, but that game is very much that is me drinking a little bit of Kool-Aid. So,
yep,
um, so 7-8 wins is what I'm looking at, just trying to be conservative, taking the red glasses off. But
yep,
it all depends on, the early slate of games, the first 6 slate of games. You got UTEP, Colorado, Rutgers, Purdue, Illinois, and I can't remember who else. One other team. It's not very good. Northern Iowa, and
yeah,
then Indiana. So our first 7 games are very winnable. I will
yep,
say that.
yeah. Well, so you have Nebraska. I think Iowa's schedule is very, very manageable. And then who knows? Like I think Wisconsin and Minnesota feel like mirror images of themselves. Like both have transfer quarterbacks. Both are trying to get more of an offensive identity. I, again, I'm not saying that either of them are like locks to be a playoff
Yeah.
team or anything like that, but I do think there's a lot of intrigue with their rosters and their
Mhm.
coaching that I think there could be a surprise one on Friday for one of those 4 teams to be like, could they sneak into the playoff or into the Big Ten championship game?
Yeah.
So,
It all comes down to quarterback from Minnesota because he's a very, very good quarterback, and I do not think people are giving him enough credit because he came from the FCS, but look what he did in the FCS. That's
yep,
all I'm gonna say.
yeah, yeah. He's the more I look at Minnesota, the more I'm like, if PJ Fleck can get out of PJ Fleck's way, they might be a lot better than we think.
And talking with Alibaba on our show, you know, he gave me a lot of insight because I was a guy who really trolled Fleck a lot. But he gave me some insight into and I've come around a little bit on Minnesota, and they might not be the sexiest team in the world, but they can be very good because they're in year 7, I believe, under Fleck,
Yep.
and they have a structure there that works. And if they can get, again, Ethan Kaliakmanis, he beat us twice, so I can't talk too much trash on him, but I do think this is an upgrade at quarterback for sure.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think Minnesota might surprise some people.
Yep. Yeah. Last couple comments, then we'll close out the show here. LFG, in my opinion, Nebraska can win 9 games. I agree.
Yep.
I think they are like I mean, you talked about the first 7 games. They could go 7-0 before
Yeah.
Ohio State.
For me being a Nebraska fan, it's hard for me to say the games we should win, we're going to win because we haven't in the past. So,
Right.
but yeah, 9 games is very, very doable.
Yep. And then Alibaba, if Darius Taylor is healthy, he's going to rip up the Big Ten. Agree with Justin about Max Brosmer.
Yeah.
I think what's incredible about like Darius Taylor is a really good talent.
Oh yeah.
That line is
Mhm.
like it's senior laden, which I feel like that was their
Big
problem
Ten
last
football
year.
team.
Yeah, they're going to play big boy smash mouth football,
Mhm.
and now they have a quarterback who can hit you over the top. I I love Daniel Jackson,
Mhm.
underrated receiver.
Yep. Agreed.
So, well, Justin, I feel like you're the man of many podcasts. Where can we find you? Where all can we find you?
So for fans of the Big Ten, you can find me and Sonny Verma over at the Big Ten Show. It's just at Big Ten Show on YouTube, at Big Ten Show on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And you can find me over at Nebraska Football at the Voice of College Football. I'm hosting the live streams over there. Just got off one an hour before I jumped on here, and recording content. So if you want some insight into your Big Ten foe, or if you just want to drop a comment, leave a like just to help me out, I really appreciate it. So, and Zack, I appreciate you and JR offering the opportunity for me to come back on. It's always fun talking to y'all. Like I said, worked with you before, worked with JR before, so always welcome the opportunity and love coming on.
Yep, yep. And we love having you, whether it's here or the Big Ten football talk. You're always bringing the knowledge and the passion. We love it. And
Appreciate it, man.
so really
Thank
grateful. For the rest of you guys, thank you so much for listening to the Big Ten Huddle. Obviously, look at the schedule on your right. Every day there is a live show that you can watch. tomorrow night we got the Big Ten basketball show at 9 p.m. And then obviously SEC, ACC, all of college football later on this week. And of course, if you want to catch me at the Big Ten Football Talk, we're dropping episodes every Monday morning, doing a state of each program up until the start of the season. And then we're going to get into some more fun stuff. It's been really fun already, but we're going to hopefully get some opposing teams podcasters together for each week. And maybe it'll get a little explosive, but obviously if you love the Big Ten Huddle, subscribe, check us out again next Tuesday night at 9 p.m. That'll do it. Thanks for joining us. Take care.